ready?
Yeah.
Yes!
This is the Ross Kaminsky Show.
You're a great American.
Now, Ross Kaminsky.
Come on, man.
On Denver's talk station, 630 KHOW.
I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody.
We should make that a permanent part of the show open. Send that over to AJ and have that put in the show open. Oh, that was yesterday. We talked about the humiliating art of the woke apology, a great piece for National Review by Rich Lowry. He actually wrote it a few months ago, but I only got to it yesterday on the show. And then a listener sent that. Ross, speaking of apologies, how about Conor McGregor? Can you play that again?
I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody.
Oh, that's so good. All right, we got a lot of stuff to do today. We're going to have some fun. We're going to have some very serious conversations as well, including coming up at 8:05. We're going to have an author on the show. If you're watching me on YouTube right now, you can see the book that I'm holding up to the camera. This book is called Sacrifice, A Gold Star Widow's Fight for the Truth by a woman named Michelle Black, who is going to join us on the show about 2 hours from now. You might recall the story from a few years ago of a group of Green Berets who got trapped and massacred by militants in the African country of Niger. And the part of the story that I guess got the most attention in the news was actually this kind of unfortunate phone call between then President Trump and the wife of one of the soldiers who died. And anyway, that story was in the news for a while. Some of the Green Berets from the team did get out. Some of them died. And long story short, Michelle Black is the widow of one of the Green Berets who died. And she found that the story that the Army told her about the mission and how and why her husband died, she found that that story was not true. And that the highest levels of the military and Africa Command, AFRICOM, were not telling her the truth, and that they were placing the blame on much lower ranked people who actually weren't responsible and had actually tried to warn against this particular mission. And she kind of became an investigative reporter and detective to try to figure out just what happened, just how her husband died. And this is the book about it. And we're going to talk with her in a couple of hours. I'm looking forward to that. And in about an hour, a little after 7 o'clock, we're going to be joined by my good friend, and I call him a mentor as well, Dr. Tom Kranowitter. And we are going to take on a question that we talked about briefly on the air, a question or a comment, actually, that came from a listener. And the context for the listener's comment was within the discussion of whether we should legalize prostitution, but the comment had much broader implications for the proper relationship between a citizen and government, for example. And the comment was, a listener said that human nature is depraved. And I said, I believe there are some depraved people, but I don't believe that human nature itself, that the default position is depraved. Thomas Hobbes would probably disagree with me. Anyway, we're going to talk with Dr. Tom Kranowitter about human nature and what the founders of the United States of America, the framers of our Constitution, what did they think of human nature? And what does the answer about the proper role, what is the answer about the default position of human nature say and mean about what our government should be? And in fact, if human nature is by default depraved, wouldn't that argue substantially against freedom? So we're going to talk about that. We got another guest or two during the course of the show as well that I think you'll enjoy. But let's do a couple other things first. Yesterday, the Biden administration, in their typical socialist way, announced that they would, and I'll quote from the Wall Street Journal here, endorse an intellectual property waiver at the World Trade Organization for COVID vaccines and therapies. In other words, the Biden administration wants to break the patents that Moderna and Pfizer in particular, Johnson & Johnson as well, have on the coronavirus vaccines that they created very, very rapidly to save lots and lots of lives in a really remarkable feat of human ingenuity. The Biden administration wants to go along with a WTO plan to break those patents so that factories around the world could make these vaccines without having to pay anything to the inventors. As the Wall Street Journal editorial board puts it, this is Biden's vaccine patent theft. Who will invest in future therapies when the White House helps other governments steal? There's some really important points in here that I want to make sure you understand, because otherwise you'll probably just hear the headline. South Africa and India have been pushing a resolution at the WTO that would force pharmaceutical companies to hand over their COVID vaccine and therapy IP to manufacturers in low-income countries. The waiver is backed by some 100 other low-income countries, progressive groups, and more than 100 Democratic members of Congress. So right there, that kind of shows you that you need to be against it. These are all people who like hurting the United States of America or hurting American big companies or simply stealing things. Even if their goal isn't to hurt anybody, if they can steal stuff from the rich, then they're very happy to do it. Waiver proponents say breaking patent protections is necessary to expand global access to vaccines. This is false. WTO rules already allow low-income countries to force drug makers to license their patents during emergencies, though they must negotiate some agreements with developers. Liberals say this is slowing vaccine production, yet U.S. and European drug companies have already voluntarily entered into dozens of licensing agreements with other manufacturers, many in low-income countries, as they work to scale up production. Merck last week announced licensing agreements with several Indian manufacturers to produce its investigational antiviral drug, but vaccine and drug makers first need to ensure their partners can safely manufacture the complex biologic products. This takes time. So does ramping up the production of raw ingredients. Even so, global vaccine production is accelerating. The U.S. has also committed $4 billion to COVAX, a World Health Organization initiative, which aims to distribute 2 billion doses to lower and middle income countries by the end of this year. Yet India, a global vaccine production powerhouse, recently restricted exports to serve its own population. European governments have opposed the waiver because they realize it sets a terrible precedent. Now, listen to this. This is a key thing. Remember that the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines are based on mRNA technology that is very new and very important and potentially the basis for a lot of other developments. Once stolen, IP on breakthrough innovations like Moderna and Pfizer-BioNTech mRNA vaccines can't be returned. So why did Mr. Biden surrender? Progressives are pounding the White House for supposedly hoarding vaccine doses, though only a few months ago it was praised for ordering more supply from Pfizer and Moderna. The White House recently agreed to release 60 million of its contracted AstraZeneca doses, but only after they received FDA approval. Contracts with other manufacturers limit exports to countries without liability protection for potential adverse side effects. The administration's WTO waiver will break patents and legal protections for vaccine makers. Investors will be less likely to fund new drug research if they think their own government will betray them under political pressure. Chalk up another damaging victory for the congressional left. You probably heard the headline, right? In this morning, just a minute or two before the show started, it was in ABC News, I think, that they were looking to do this. This is theft. This is what progressives do. The primary economic model of progressives is theft. It's not complicated. The main reason is that progressives aren't very good at producing things. They don't believe in profit incentive. They don't believe in hard work, except for whatever work might be involved, throwing a Molotov cocktail at a federal government building. They're just not very productive people. They think that they should just be given stuff. Think about Tay Anderson. What a perfect example. Tay Anderson, a guy who quit a paying job to go get a seat on the school board because his paying job was working for the school district, and you can't be a school district employee while you're on the school board. So he quit a paying job to go get on the school board, and then decides to ask the government to start paying school board members while also putting out GoFundMes, asking people to give him money when he pretended to fall, and asking him to buy diapers for his kid. And he just recently became a dad. Congratulations, Tay, for becoming a dad, with a woman who he apparently has little, if any, connection with, who is definitely not still part of his life. So he is an unemployed single dad who thinks that the appropriate role for him, and remember, he's 22, an unemployed single dad who at the age of 22 thinks his job is to tell actual grown-ups how their school-age children should be schooled by Denver Public Schools. If that doesn't capture the entire mindset of a progressive in one person, I don't know what does. Live off of the hard work and generosity of others. When they're not generous enough, use the government to force them to pay you, and spend the rest of your time telling Americans how to live. Oh my gosh, what a perfect progressive that guy is. But has he ever done anything? I'm sorry, Director Tay Anderson. He's just a perfect example. And you can imagine someone like that saying, well, Pfizer has a lot of money, or Moderna has a lot of money, so why shouldn't we just take what they made and give it to other people who don't have it? By the way, even though there are already and can be more agreements in place that will allow manufacturers, vaccine manufacturers in other countries, to produce the vaccine with some fairly easy contracts they can set up with the manufacturers. Nope. Not when it comes to America's progressive left. So just remember that as you see this stuff go through. And, the next time, I read a great line about this thing. I don't remember where I read it, but they quoted a doctor who said that this idea of breaking the patent so that every other place that wants to make a vaccine can make it without having to reach any agreement with Pfizer and Moderna, who invented it. The doctor said, this is a fantastic model if you believe that this is the last pandemic that we will ever face. I think you get the point. Tell you what, let me do, I was going to take a long time on this, but I think I'm going to take a short time on this instead. There's a battle that's probably going to end up not being really much of a battle about the future of Liz Cheney in Republican Party leadership. And I don't spend a lot of time talking about political nuts and bolts and the machinations within Congress and all that. But this is such a big story because she is number 3 in House Republican leadership. She is the only woman in House Republican leadership, and she will likely be booted out of House Republican leadership in favor of Elise Stefanik, a congresswoman from upstate New York, who used to be a moderate conservative and then became a very, very Trumpy kind of person. And whatever, I don't care. She can do whatever she wants to do. That represents her district. No skin off of my back. But anyway, she and Liz Cheney apparently used to be pretty close friends, and now not so much. Liz Cheney wrote an op-ed for the Washington Post that was published yesterday afternoon. And it's a long thing about President Trump and January 6th and all the lies about the election being stolen. And she talks about what Republicans need to do from her perspective. She said Republicans need to support the DOJ criminal investigations of the January 6th attack. She said Republicans should support a parallel bipartisan review by an independent commission with subpoena power to seek and find facts. She said that no currently serving member of Congress should participate. And she said, finally, we Republicans need to stand for genuinely conservative principles and steer away from the dangerous and anti-democratic Trump cult of personality. Liz Cheney says, in our hearts, we are devoted to the American miracle. We believe in the rule of law, in limited government, in a strong national defense, and in prosperity and opportunity brought by low taxes and fiscally conservative policies. She ends her op-ed by saying, history is watching, our children are watching. Our children are watching. We must be brave enough to defend the basic principles that underpin and protect our freedom and our democratic process. I'm committed to doing that no matter what the short-term political consequences might be. So let me say 2 things here. I agree with pretty much every word of Liz Cheney's op-ed, and I think she probably does need to be removed from leadership. I'm not a Republican, and I often stand up for Republicans who buck the party a little bit on significant issues of principle. But I just don't understand what the purpose is for Liz Cheney to keep talking about Trump and January 6th and all this stuff over and over and over right now as the Republican Party is trying to put together a coalition that would still include Trump supporters, although hopefully not Trump himself. A coalition that can take back the House and Senate in 2022 and the White House in 2024. And if Liz Cheney can't help do that, doesn't mean she shouldn't be in Congress. But I do think it means she shouldn't be in leadership. Next, the most insane CDC guidance yet.
KHOW Denver, 630 KHOW, an iHeartRadio station.